Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher. Welcome to Sweetwater's Guitars and Gear. You know, one of the questions I'm asked the most often is what order to place pedals on in a pedal board. Should the wah go first? Should the compressor be before or after the distortion? Where should the volume pedal go? These types of questions make a big difference in the results you get with your pedal board. So I'm joined today in the studio by Don Carr, and we're going to be taking a look at what it sounds like when we place our pedals in different order, and we're going to end up with a working pedal board when we're finished. Let's get started. Don, I know you've built a lot of pedal boards in your career, and of course I've put together tons of them. It seems like I'm changing just about every week.
Oh, I know, man. New stuff coming out all the time. You always want to try something different. You get an idea, you know.
Right.
Just never know what's going to happen, right?
Exactly right. But there is kind of a conventional wisdom to how you place your pedals in the order.
Sure, and you know, typically I tend to follow something that's close to that conventional wisdom, which is like, you know, just to rattle it off the top of my head, let's say wah, compressor, gain pedals, volume pedal, modulation pedals, and then time-based stuff.
Right.
And that's kind of the typical order, but you know, you've got tons of flexibility in that.
There are so many different options. Obviously, even with a fairly simple pedal board like we have here, we could, I don't know how many possible routings there are with all these pedals.
Yeah, right. I don't want to do the math. I don't know about you. Nobody said there was going to be math
Yeah,
today.
no math involved today.
No.
So what we have here is a pedal board that's very similar to one that I might take out to a gig. I've got a wah pedal, I've got a tuner, an overdrive, a delay, compressor, phase shifter, which might be a chorus or might be a flanger depending on the gig. I've also got a reverb and I've got a volume pedal. Now there are lots of ways we can wire this up. Before we start, let's take a look at the default setup we have here as far as our wiring and our signal flow. We're coming out of Don's guitar, which is a Yamaha RevStar 620, into an Electro-Harmonix wah. From there we're feeding into a Wampler Mini Ego compressor. From the compressor we're going into the Catlin bred Dirty Little Secret Overdrive. Coming out of the DLS into an MXR Phase 95, which is a phase shifter, and again, that could be any modulation pedal. It could be chorus, flanger, rotary speaker, whatever you might have. From there, we're going into our volume pedal. Now, the signal actually splits on the volume pedal. We've got an output here that's feeding directly into our tuner. So when we pull back on the volume pedal, we're still feeding into the tuner and we have silent tuning on stage. From the volume pedal, we're going into our delay, to our reverb, and then back to our amplifier, which is a Rivera modded Fender 68 Deluxe. Don, this pedal board is set up basically following that conventional wisdom that you were talking about, although we have the volume pedal in a little different place than you. I mentioned we've got it after the modulation instead of before, and we'll look at what effect that has a little bit later. But I think the most critical item to place in our signal flow is actually our overdrive or our gain pedals.
Absolutely, because the way gain affects the sound of other effects is just ridiculous. I mean, that's the most obvious thing.
Right, all that extra harmonic content really changes the way a wah pedal, a phase shifter, even a delay, and certainly a compressor respond.
Oh yeah, and reverb too, for sure.
Now let's look at some examples of what it sounds like when we change the order of these pedals. We'll begin with our wah and our overdrive. In this case, I've got the wah pedal in front of our overdrive. So Don, give us our clean signal. So we have a neutral clean tone there. Now let's listen to what happens when we run the wah pedal before and after the overdrive. We'll begin with the wah pedal in front. The next question is where to place your compressor in your signal path. Now Don, the compressor, of course, is designed to increase your sustain, but it also clamps down on those transients and really smooths the sound out. It's used a lot for chicken picking and those kind of things for clean tones, but it makes a big difference with distortion as well.
Yeah, it absolutely does. I mean, you can feed your distortion pedal with your compressor, bump the gain up a little bit, smooth out the attack. I mean, it completely changes it. And again, putting it on the other side of the overdrive pedal is a completely different thing.
On the other side of the overdrive pedal, it's going to be squashing that distorted tone. It's kind of recompressing because the distortion has natural compression in it as well. Just the fact that it's actually square waving the signal.
Right, and it's taking that harmonic content and actually kind of condensing it.
Let's listen to what that sounds like. Now, the thing to remember with a compressor pedal is not only is it squashing the peaks, but it's also changing the shape of that tail of the note to increase the sustain.
Exactly. If you've got your compressor pedal after, like say your delay or anything that has a tail on it, reverb, it's going to increase that peak and completely change the sound of it.
Even with modulation pedals, it's going to tend to squash those peaks and make the sound more uniform, more smooth.
Which is also going to have the effect of bringing up the tail.
Right. Next up, let's take a look at modulation pedals in overdrive. I've got an MXR Phase 95, a phase shifter here, and of course we have our DLS. We'll listen to the phase shifter by itself, then the DLS by itself, the phase shifter in front of the DLS, and the phase shifter after the DLS. To me, that's a lot like what we heard with the wah pedal.
Sure, it's the exact same thing where you've got more intensity with the effect after the distortion.
Right, all that extra content from the distortion, all those harmonics are being processed by the phase shifter. It gives you a much more intense effect. Now let's look at our overdrive or our gain pedal in relation to time-based effects, which would include things like delay and reverb. Where you place your gain pedal in relation to those two types of effects is critical in the sound that you get. Now this also carries over when you're plugging into an amplifier. If you're plugging into a distorted channel, obviously your time-based effects are going to be in front of that distortion, and we'll simulate that by moving our gain pedal after our delay effect. So let's check out what this sounds like. It really makes a difference where the delay is in relation to the overdrive pedal.
Sure does. Again, that extra harmonic content really changes things.
Well, that and the fact that the overdrive is actually increasing the gain of signals that are coming in. So instead of tailing away the way you'd expect the delay to, the overdrive is actually pushing those up. So we get a much messier sound because the delay repeats are coming out at close to the same level that the original signal did.
Right. You've also got the fact that the delay sounds are being filtered by that as well.
Right. The same type of thing is going to happen if you place your distortion after a reverb, because that reverb tail, instead of decaying naturally, is going to be boosted by the gain, and it's going to end up being much more of a steady state, so you have a long tail that just drops off instead of a slow, steady decline. Now let's talk about placement of your volume pedal in the chain. There are several different places where you can put the volume pedal, aren't there, Don?
All right. You can put it in the front of the chain, you can put it in the middle of the chain, or at the very end.
And it makes a big difference on how the rest of your pedals react where you have that volume pedal placed. So let's take a look at the first example of this, which is placing the volume pedal before and after our gain pedals. When the volume pedal is before the gain pedal, it's going to function basically like the volume knob on your guitar. It's going to change the amount of signal that's feeding into your gain pedal. When the volume pedal is after the gain pedal, it's going to serve as a master volume for that gain pedal. So you can still affect the amount of overdrive by turning your guitar volume knob up and down, but you can change the overall volume that's coming from that gain pedal using the volume pedal. Let's listen to those two examples. So what we're hearing there is with the volume pedal in front of the overdrive, it's basically controlling the amount of distortion or gain that's coming from the pedal.
That's right. It's totally dynamic that way. You can use it to, increase your sustain or back off of it, or, just play dynamically.
And with the volume pedal after the overdrive, it's really serving as a volume control for that overdrive.
Yeah, that's the way I like to use it after the distortion pedal. I like to use it as a master volume because I can always use my volume knob on my guitar to control the dynamic range.
So you kind of have the best of both worlds at that point. It's also important where you place your volume pedal in relation to your delay, your reverb, or your other time-based effects. Don, where do you like to put it?
I like to put it beforehand. That way you can get the tails of the delay and the verb when you back off the volume pedal, and you can swell in and out of stuff.
So we mentioned there were 3 places in the signal path where you could put your volume pedal. At the front, which we showed in front of the overdrive pedal, where it controls the amount of distortion. After the overdrive pedal, it gives us a master volume from that overdrive pedal, but it also affects what's feeding into our time-based effects. So we can turn the amount of signal up that's feeding into our delay and reverb, or turn it down while still allowing the reverb and delay tails to ring out. So this is our third position for the volume pedal
Right.
at the very end of the signal path.
Yeah, as a master volume, an overall master volume to control the sound that's going directly into your amp.
Right, in this case, we're able to actually turn down the tails on our reverb and our delay because it's the last thing before we hit the amplifier.
Sure, and you can also shut it completely off, like if you just need a hard stop.
Okay, yeah, I see what you did there, a hard stop, but that's exactly right.
Yeah.
We've got a master volume controller that can also serve as a mute. And again, no matter where we have this placed, because we're using the tuner output from the volume pedal, we can still access our tuner.
Yeah, I love having that feature as well, because at any given time, if you notice one string is out of tune, you can just duck out really quick, tune up, and there you go.
And you're back in action. Today we've looked at the basics of signal flow on a pedal board, what happens when you change the order of particular pedals, and in my mind the two critical ones are the overdrive and the volume pedal.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Those are the two that make the biggest single change.
Right. Where you place those in relation to your modulation, your filter effects, your compressor, your delay, your reverb, your time-based effects, really has a big impact with those two pedals in particular. But of course we haven't looked at all the possibilities. There are endless permutations to how you would wire up even a fairly simple board like this. Just to give you one example, let's say we took our phase shifter and put it after our reverb.
Yeah, in one case you've got filtering reverb, and in the other case you've got filtered reverb.
Right, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, it does.
So you can experiment with those different types of placements and get creative with the order that you put your pedals in on your board and how you wire them up. You're not going to hurt anything. Nothing's going to blow up by changing the order of your different pedals.
Exactly. I mean, there's no wrong answer here. It's just whatever kind of result you want to get.
Don, thanks for helping me out, showing the effects of changing our pedal order on the board. Really makes a big difference how you wire things up.
Yeah, it really does. A lot of fun, Mitch. Thanks, man.
You bet. And thank you for joining me for Sweetwater's Guitars and Gear. Be sure to tune in next time. We'll have more guitars, more amps, more effects, and we'll be making lots of music. I'm Mitch Gallagher.